Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and today's video is going to be totally different than the memory keeping or Bible journaling that I normally do. We are going to make some Christmas ornaments or gift tags, however you want to use them. I know this is a little bit late and close to Christmas to be doing this video. I tried to do this last week, but my oven died. And so one of the ones I'm going to do uses this oven baked clay. And so if you're following me on Instagram, you'll know I shared on my stories. I sat down to do this video and remembered my oven died last week, and I didn't have an oven for a week, but we have a new oven, praise God. And so I can jump in and show you how to do the oven baked clay ornaments or tags. And then I also have some wood slices. Now I do have a wood slice ornament video either from last year or the year before. I will link that down below. It's something a little bit different if you're looking for some ideas. I'm sure some of you are like me and are last minute gift preparing this weekend, so hopefully you could use these maybe as some tags or just a fun project if you are also like me and your kids are driving you nuts already a week into Christmas break and need an activity to do with them. I was looking at the stamp sets this year, and so I've got this stamp set that came from the Illustrated Faith kit. I have some of these little mini stamps from ByTheWell4God. I have some of the past stamp sets from Illustrated Faith, and I was trying to think of some more creative ways to use these other than just tags or Bible journaling or the standard ways to do them. And some of them are really cute and were things that I wanted to look at more than just in my Bible or something like that. And so I thought it'd be fun to use these with these two different elements to make some ornaments or ornament tags. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to put you on fast forward. We're going to do two separate ideas here. I've only tested out one of them kind of, and it failed, so we'll just see what happens. So let me go ahead and put you on fast forward and we will put these together. Okay, so I'm going to start with one of these wood slice ornaments, and I'm just going to take some cheap craft acrylic paint to paint the front of this. These slices I got from Amazon. You could very easily make these. My husband cut some for me a couple years ago when I did that other video, but this was way easier. You order them, they're cut thin, you can pick the sizes, they already have the holes drilled, so I will link the ones that I got down below. I think that's kind of the way to go. So I'm just gonna add a thin layer of this craft paint. You do want to make sure that the front of this is nice and smooth, so you may need to sand these down a little bit. Mine were pretty smooth, so I didn't need to do anything to them, but I'm just wanting to make sure I get a very smooth application of paint on here, which will make the stamping easier. So I like that chalkboard look of the white on the black, so this one is going to be with the black paint. And this is sped up, but I am taking my time to make sure that I have a nice clean edge, nice clean line as I paint that in. And then I'm going to take my heat tool to dry this. Because I'm going to be doing some heat embossing, I want to make sure that this paint is bone dry, 100% dry before I go in with the embossing powder. So I'm just heating that up quite a bit, make sure that paint is 100% dry before I move on to the next step. So I'm going to pull out some different stamps and figure out what is going to work. Now, I actually measured these stamps before I ordered these wood slices since I knew that I was going to be using these. So I specifically ordered wood slices that were sized to kind of fit these stamps since they're a little bit taller. So I'm just kind of eyeballing to see what I want. I decided I'm going to use these ones from ByTheWell4God on the wood slices. And then we're going to do some embossing. So I'm going to pull out some Versamark ink. This is a clear sticky ink, some Ranger white embossing powder. And before I stamp, I'm going to use my EK Success powder tool and dust this over the front of this wood slice tons. I want to make sure that everything is dry. There's no fingerprints. There's nothing for that embossing powder to stick to other than the ink I'm going to stamp with. Now, we're stamping on something that is natural wood, and so it is going to be imperfect. Just keep that in mind. But I'm going to go ahead and load up the stamp, load it up with some Versamark ink. I'm making sure to get plenty of the ink on the stamp, and then I can take it to the wood slice. Now, you want to make sure that you really push down and get good pressure. I have found that this project works way better with a firmer stamp. You don't want to use the stamps that are kind of soft and mushy. For example, some of the kit stamps from Illustrated Faith a few months ago were that softer material. Those don't work as well because you want to be able to get good pressure. And then I can go ahead and coat that with the white embossing powder, and you'll notice it's kind of sticking to some other places. I may have gotten better results if I had added like 2 or 3 layers of the paint. I think the embossing powder is sticking to the texture of the wood, if that makes sense. And so it's not going to be perfect. You're just got to accept that with these. So once I get that how I want it to look, I'll go ahead and heat set this. All I have is a Ranger heat tool, which usually works just fine. Embossing just takes a few seconds and it melts. I did notice on these wood slices, it took forever to melt this embossing powder. So you may want to look at getting an actual embossing tool. It's a heat gun specifically for embossing, and so it gets much hotter, and it's kind of like a concentrated area of heat. That may work a little bit better, but you can see once that embossing powder is completely melted, I have that fun chalkboard look, and it's going to hold up to the test of time. It's going to, endure some wear and tear. If you don't want to mess with embossing and all that goodness, this is another example, and really you could do a lot of different things with this one. So I am going to go in with some white acrylic paint. You could use any color really that you want, but these particular wood slices you can see have very pronounced rings on the wood, and so I want to give myself kind of a neutral background to stamp on. So I am going to go ahead and just paint this in white. I do believe one of the girls from the Illustrated Faith team did something similar to this. I want to say it was either Vanessa or Jill. I'll try to link it down below. It was on Instagram, did something similar to this with the Illustrated Faith stamps. So I'm going to go ahead and just, like I said, add a layer of white. I probably should have gone in and added 2 or 3 layers, but I knew that these were going to take a while, so I'm wanting it to be pretty quick. Again, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that's good and dry, not because I'm going to emboss, but once I stamp over it, I want to make sure it's dry. It's easier to stamp on. So to stamp this one, I am going to just use a regular black ink. And you want to use a permanent ink, preferably an archival ink. That's going to stand up to wear and tear, test of time, years and years to come. Archival ink. Archival ink comes in a lot of different colors, and I think that would be the best ink to use for this. So I'm using just some black Ranger archival ink, and I'm making sure the stamp is really coated in that ink so that I get a good impression. And I'm adding tons of pressure, really trying to make sure that I'm pushing down in all the areas. But you can see it's not perfect. There is an area there where those rings were really pronounced, and so it's kind of patchy. So I'm just going in with a Illustrated Faith pen. These are an archival pen. They're meant to last for a long time, permanent pen, and it matches the black ink. So I'm going in and just carefully filling in any of the areas that didn't stamp well. You can see here's fast forwarded and finished. Again, I don't want it to be perfect. It's handmade, it's okay. But you can have a lot of fun stamping different colors and things like that. So moving on to the clay ornaments. We have this Sculpey clay. I will link it down below. I got mine from Amazon, and there are a lot of different options. I saw some of these done with like air dry clay or salt dough, but as I watched different videos and things, I felt like these had the best results and the most predictable results. Some of those other clays or doughs, when you bake them, kind of puff up and you'll lose the detail. So I'm just taking off a chunk of this clay, and you want to kind of, like I'm doing here, knead it in your hands to warm it up, get it soft and pliable and easy to work with. It's pretty cold in my house, so this clay had gotten pretty hard, and so I am working in little small chunks. You could work with bigger chunks, but I don't really want to use anything from my kitchen that's going to have food on it with this clay. So I don't want to use a wood rolling pin with the clay because I just don't feel like it's going to get 100% clean. And so I'm just taking this old jar, and so I'm having to work with smaller bits of clay just to fit this smaller jar to roll it out. And I am trying to work on a clean surface because this clay will pick up any ink or fuzz or dirt or anything that's on the surface, and since we're going to leave it the color of the clay, it will show any of those specks and things. So I'm working on this non-stick craft mat. I will link it down below, and it makes it easy to pull this up off of that, and I don't have to worry about ruining my surface. So I just rolled that out to about the size. I'm going to use that jar to cut out the ornament as well. So I just made sure that it was going to be big enough for that. And then here I've pulled out the stamp set. This is the one from the Illustrated Faith Grace and Gratitude Kit 2. This is no longer available, but you can use any stamps that you want. And we're going to stamp with some colored inks. So I found with the clay one, since you're going to bake them, you really can use whatever ink you want. So here I'm using a dye-based ink. These are Gina K inks. They have some really, really pretty colors. This one here is Sea Glass. I've also pulled out Peach Bellini. And I'm just making sure I don't have ink anywhere on the stamp where it shouldn't be. Because this clay is squishy, you're going to push down the stamp, you may transfer ink into places you don't want. So I just want to make sure I get a nice clean impression. Initially I was pressing down pretty hard into the clay, but you really don't need to press down too hard. Some of those fine detailed stamps, you lose some of the detail when you push down really hard. So just kind of play with it and experiment. For this little deer, I'm going in with that Peach Bellini color. I thought these really went well with kind of the Illustrated Faith colors of this kit. Kind of fresh and fun and different from maybe your traditional Christmas colors, but you could really use anything. You could match it to the color and theme of your tree. These would be even fun if you're going to use them as gift tags. You could even do non-Christmas during the rest of the year with different colors, different stamps, and use them as gift tags that way. So you really could do a lot of things with these. Here I'm going in with the word hope, and I'm using some VersaFine ink because it's very intense black. And here's where I noticed where I had pushed pretty deep with that wreath, and then I had some difficulty getting a good impression with the word hope. So you may want to just have less pressure or stamp your deeper word like the word hope first and then layer the other bits on there. It's just kind of experimenting. And then you want to go ahead and cut it out. You don't want to cut it out first and then stamp on it because when you push down, it is going to kind of deform the shape of the circle. So I make sure I get all my stamping first and then cut it out with the jar. And then I'll just use a straw to go ahead and cut out the hole for the ribbon that we're going to use. Don't worry about those edges. We'll clean those up after it's baked. If you have cookie cutters, that would probably work better. I don't bake cookies like that, so I don't really have cookie cutters. And again, I didn't really want to use stuff I'm using with food on this project. So I just used the jar and it worked out just fine. So I've gone ahead and rolled out another piece of this clay, and I like them pretty thin. These are probably maybe 1/8 of an inch thin. They're pretty thin. And once I bake them, that seems to be okay. The thicker they are, the longer you have to bake it. So I decided to go thin and keep it quick and easy. Here I'm going to go ahead and stamp my word first. So it's the word peace. Again, I'm stamping with that VersaFine Onyx Black ink. It gives you very intense black. And then now I'm going to go in and just kind of build a scene. So using those Gina K inks, again, you could use pigment inks. I don't know that you could get away with using Distress Oxide inks. I'm not sure how those would stay permanent. I'd be nervous about them getting wet and the ink reactivating or something. So I would stick with something that dries more on the permanent side, would probably be your best bet. Here I'm going to go ahead and layer some other trees in there, and if I want shorter trees, I just wipe off the ink off the bottom of the tree, and then where the impression is on the ornament, just kind of smush it back in with my finger, smooth it out, and that seems to work okay. And for this one, I'm not pressing quite as hard because it's that finer detailed stamp. I've kind of learned from that other one that it's better not to stamp too deep. And then I thought it'd be fun to maybe change it up and add some sparkles. So here's some Delicata Gold ink. This is a pigment ink that dries permanent. And I just thought we'd experiment, try, see what happens after it goes through the oven. I'm going to use a variety of different star shapes from the different stamps and add a little scene up here. And at this point I notice I have like this weird, awkward, like empty space, and I end up pulling out a couple different things trying to make it work, and I go with this little bird from that stamp set and stamp that in the black ink as well. Now one thing is, once you stamp this, let's say you mess something up, you can't really like knead this and roll it out because that color is going to be in the clay. So you would have to throw it away if you make a mistake at this point. So just keep that in mind. I'm just trying to be careful. So now I can go ahead and put all of these on a cookie sheet with some parchment paper underneath and stick them in the oven to bake for how long it says on the directions of the clay that you are using for this project. Each one's going to be a little bit different, and it depends on how thick you cut out your ornaments. Okay, so while I have my ornaments in the oven, I thought I'd pop in really quick and show you how to clean your stamps. I know some of you are kind of probably nervous about this technique because of what it can do to your stamps. Don't worry, this works even if your stamps are just dirty from use with inks and things like that. So what I have here is just some warm soapy water, just a little bit of soap and warm water, and I'm just going to dunk all my stamps that I used. Even though some of them I cleaned off really well with my stamp chamois, I want to make sure that the clay isn't going to ruin these. So I'm going to go ahead and just dump all of these into this warm water and just kind of rub them clean with the warm water, and then I'll take this to the sink, rinse these off in clean water, and then just let them air dry out on like a piece of paper towel or on your desk, whatever you want to do. Just let them air dry, and that will also reactivate the stickiness on the back of these stamps. So don't worry about messing them up. That oven clay doesn't get hard unless it's baked in the oven. So I didn't have to worry about cleaning these as I worked. I could just set them aside while I stamp all those ornaments. The clay is not going to dry on these, and then warm soapy water is just taking all that clay, all of that ink, any finger smudges, anything that might be on these stamps, and cleaning it off, and then my stamps are good to go. So you do not have to worry about ruining your stamps with this process. So I'm going to go ahead and take these to the sink, rinse them off, and then I'll show you the finished ornaments. Okay, so these are my finished ornaments. What I did was I put them in the oven at 275, and the directions say to do them 15 minutes for every 1/4 of an inch thick that your clay is. Now mine is a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch, so I actually did 20 minutes just because I'm a little OCD and wanted to make sure they were done, but 15 minutes would have been more than enough. You can see this one kind of got a little bit dark in the oven, and this clay really just depends on your oven. Just be open to some variety in how they get finished. That's one thing I found out. This clay can be a little bit unpredictable. Once that 15 or 20 minutes was up, I went ahead and shut off my oven, open the door, and then just let them cool inside the oven. That way they stayed in that heat a little bit and cooled down with the oven. If I was to pull them out into my cold house, it can make them brittle and make them not as strong, I guess, if you go from the hot to the cold really quickly. So I let them cool down in there. One thing you'll notice about this clay is it does stay semi-flexible. I had one, I was able to completely fold it in half before it started to crack. So they are pretty durable. I was a little bit unsure because they are flexible, but the nice thing about that, especially if you've got kiddos or pets, is that if it does fall off your tree, you don't have to worry about it shattering and breaking if it was that really hard substance. So they do have some flex to them, so you just want to be careful. And to finish them up, once they are cool, I have this rough edge from where I cut them out, and so I just take a sanding block and just gently go around the edge of the ornament to kind of clean up that edge. You can sand it down as much as you want, and this just takes away that kind of imperfect edge. But just remember, these are handmade, so I don't want them to look perfect. You can see this one, I got kind of wonky there at the top, and that is okay. They are handmade, like I said. One thing I remembered was the Names of God stamp set from Illustrated Faith. So I pulled that out and did some of these smaller ones. My tree has a burlap ribbon with the Names of God painted on it that I made a few years ago, and so I'm going to make a few more of these, and it's really going to go well with that. You'll see this one here, I even used some Delicata gold ink for the stars and did some layering up with different colored stamps, little birds, so lots of variety and things that you can do. For a hanger, you can use cute ribbons and things if you want. My trees are very rustic and have lots of burlap and things like that. So I just have some jute twine, and I'm going to cut a length off and just tie a knot in the top there. And then I'm going to thread the bottom of that through that hole that we created with the straw. Pull that through carefully. And then I'm going to go ahead and pass that knot through that hole and just create, this one has a lot of like plant debris on it because it is jute, so it is all natural. So I can just cut that out if I want to, or get a new piece even if I wanted to. There we go, that got some of it out. And then this way, when it's on my tree, oops, it'll actually hang facing out. Or you can use it as a gift tag. Like I said, you could use alphabet stamps and put out, you know, somebody's name or something like that and use it as a tag. So lots of different ways that you can use these. I will use the same twine on these wood slice ones. So yeah, that was just a kind of a fun, creative way to use your stamps. If you make something like this, go ahead and tag me on Instagram at LindseyDecor413 or hashtag LindseyDecor so I can see what you're doing and be inspired by how you're making ornaments or tags. And I hope this was fun. I hope it was something that you are looking forward to doing maybe with your kiddos or something like that. So if you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those down below. Check out the description box for links to everything that I mentioned today. Give this video a thumbs up if it was fun. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.